I was pressing my navy dress with tiny white flowers when my phone buzzed with an urgent text from my lawyer. Call me immediately. In my 68 years, I've learned that messages like that rarely bring good news. I'm Karen Adams, and 6 months ago, I thought I was the luckiest mother-in-law in Santa Fe. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. David Goldman had been my attorney for 15 years, ever since my husband Richard passed away. He never contacted me after business hours unless something was seriously wrong. Karen, his voice was tight when I called. I need you to sit down for this. I perched on the edge of my bed in the small apartment I'd rented after selling my house. The cheerful yellow walls I'd painted to brighten my spirits suddenly felt garish under the afternoon light. What's wrong? David, is it about the will revisions we discussed? No, Karen, this is about Sophia, about your son's wife. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. What about Sophia? She's not who she claims to be. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. You can smell the danger, but you can't quite see the flames yet. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? I mean, Sophia Patel doesn't exist, at least not the version your son married. I laughed nervously. David, that's ridiculous. I've known Sophia for over a year. She's a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. She grew up in Michigan. Lost her parents in a boating accident when she was 25. Karen, there is no record of a Sophia Patel ever working at Children's Hospital. The woman your son married has been using a false identity. My dress slipped from my hands onto the floor. Through my small window, I could see the pine tree where I'd hung a bird feeder, watching cardinals visit throughout the lonely winter months. Such an ordinary view for such an extraordinary conversation. That's impossible, I whispered. I'm afraid it's not. My investigator started looking into her background for the insurance policy updates you requested. What he found. David paused. Karen, you need to get to your son's house immediately. Don't call ahead. Don't warn them you're coming. Just go. As I drove to Henry's house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I thought about how eagerly I'd embraced my new daughter-in-law. Maybe too eagerly. When you've been widowed for 15 years and your only child lives his busy life in another world of career success and social obligations, a warm, attentive daughter-in-law feels like a gift from heaven. Sophia had seemed to genuinely enjoy my company, calling me Mom Adams with such affection that it made my heart flutter. She'd been the one who suggested I sell my house. Mom Adams, she'd said over coffee in my kitchen last spring, her hazel eyes wide with concern. This place is getting too big for you to manage alone. And honestly, the neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. I'd lived in that house for 37 years, raised Henry there, nursed Richard through his final illness in the bedroom overlooking the garden I'd tended for decades. But Sophia painted such a picture of independence and fresh starts that I found myself nodding along. Henry and I have been talking, she'd continued, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. We're going to need help with the wedding expenses. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you sold this house, you could help us start our life together properly. And you could get a cute little apartment closer to us. We could see each other so much more often. The wedding had cost $47,000. I'd contributed $35,000 from the sale of my house, money I'd planned to live on for the rest of my retirement. But seeing Henry's face light up as he danced with his bride had made every penny seem worth it. Or so I'd thought. Now, pulling into their driveway behind Henry's BMW, I felt sick. The house they'd bought with the remainder of my money looked so perfect in the evening light, with its manicured lawn and designer landscaping. Through the front window, I could see them moving around the kitchen, preparing for my visit. They looked happy, normal, like a young couple excited to host Henry's mother for dinner. I sat in my car for a long moment, watching them through that window. Whatever David's investigator had discovered, my son didn't know about it yet. In a few minutes, I was going to destroy his world. But as I watched Sophia laugh at something Henry said, tossing her perfectly styled black hair, I realized something that made my blood run cold. She'd been playing a role this entire time. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment I'd felt grateful for her presence in our lives, it had all been an act. And I'd not only fallen for it, I'd paid for the privilege. Henry opened the door with his usual broad smile, wrapping me in the kind of hug that reminded me he'd always be my little boy, even at 42. Mom, perfect timing. Sophia's making her famous chicken curry. He stepped back, and I noticed something I'd never seen before. He looked tired. Not just end-of-workday tired, but bone-deep exhausted. Everything all right, honey? I asked, following him into the living room. Just work stuff. You know how it is in financial consulting. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. Sophia emerged from the kitchen wearing a floral apron over designer jeans, looking like she'd stepped out of a home magazine. Mom, Adams, I'm so glad you could make it. She hugged me with the same warmth she'd shown for months, and for a moment, I doubted everything David had told me. This couldn't be an act. No one was that good at pretending. Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes, she said. Can I get you some wine? I opened that Chardonnay you brought last time. As she bustled back to the kitchen, I noticed something else I'd overlooked before. The house was decorated entirely in Sophia's taste. Not a single item reflected Henry's personality. Not his Yale memorabilia, not the antique chess set his father had left him, not even the painting of the Grand Canyon he'd loved from our old house. It was as if Henry Adams had been erased from his own home. Sophia certainly has strong decorating opinions, I said carefully. Henry glanced around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Yeah, she has great taste. Says my old stuff made the place look like a bachelor pad. But his voice carried a note I recognized, the same tone he'd used as a child when defending choices he wasn't entirely comfortable making. Henry, I said quietly, can we talk privately for a minute? Sophia appeared in the doorway instantly, as if she'd been listening. Is everything okay? Fine, sweetheart, I said with a smile that felt like glass. I just wanted to ask Henry about his work presentation next week. Her eyes narrowed slightly. So slightly that 6 months ago I would have missed it, but now I was looking for cracks in her performance. And I found them. Actually, Henry said, I should check on something in my office anyway. Mom, want to see the new computer setup Sophia got me? As we walked down the hall, I caught a glimpse of Sophia in my peripheral vision. She wasn't moving toward the kitchen. She was standing perfectly still, watching us go. And the expression on her face wasn't the warm concern of a loving wife. It was calculation. In Henry's office, the one room that still looked like him. I closed the door and turned to face my son. Henry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. How much do you really know about Sophia's past? Henry sat down heavily in his desk chair, and I saw something in his expression that broke my heart relief. As if someone had finally asked the question he'd been afraid to ask himself. Why? He said quietly. What's wrong? Answer me first. What do you actually know about her background? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. She grew up in Ann Arbor, lost her parents in a boating accident when she was 25, worked her way through nursing school, moved here 3 years ago for a fresh start. Have you ever seen pictures of her family, her childhood home, nursing school graduation? She says it's too painful to talk about. The accident was traumatic, but doubt was creeping into his voice. Mom, what's going on? I pulled out my phone and showed him the text thread with David. My attorney's investigator looked into Sophia's background for some insurance paperwork. Henry, there's no record of a Sophia Patel ever working at Children's Hospital. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. She gets calls from the hospital. She talks about her patients. When have you actually heard these calls? Henry opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. His eyes grew wide with a realization that was clearly painful. She takes them in the other room, says patient confidentiality requires privacy. Have you ever visited her at work, met her colleagues? She said the hospital has strict policies about personal visitors in the pediatric ward. His voice was barely a whisper now. Mom, you're scaring me. I'm scared too, honey. But there's more. Before I could continue, we heard the kitchen timer go off, followed by Sophia's cheerful call, Dinner's ready. Henry looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the 8-year-old boy who'd come to me when the neighborhood bullies made him doubt himself. What do I do? We go eat dinner, I said. And we act normal while I figure out how to tell you the rest. But as we walked back down the hall, I saw Sophia standing at the stove, and something about her posture too rigid, too alert, told me she'd heard more of our conversation than we'd realized. The dining room table was set with the good china, my good china actually, that I'd given them as a wedding gift. Sophia had prepared a beautiful meal, everything perfect down to the cloth napkins and fresh flowers. "This looks wonderful, dear," I said, taking my seat. "I wanted everything to be special," Sophia replied, but her smile seemed forced now. "Henry has been so stressed with work lately. I thought a nice family dinner might help." As we began eating, I watched my daughter-in-law carefully every gesture, every expression, every word choice, looking for the woman David's investigator had discovered underneath the performance. And slowly, I began to see her. "Oh, Mom Adams," Sophia said, cutting her chicken with surgical precision. "How are you settling into your new apartment? I hope you don't regret selling the house." There was something in her tone too casual, too pointed, that made my nerves sharpen. "Actually, I've been wondering about that," I said carefully. "It's been almost a year since I sold it, and I realize I never got a clear picture of where all that money went." Henry looked up from his plate. "What do you mean?" "Well, you said the wedding cost $47,000, and I contributed $35,000, but I gave you $50,000 total. What happened to the other 15? Silence fell over the table like a heavy blanket. Henry frowned, clearly doing mental math, while Sophia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. There were additional expenses," Sophia said finally. "The honeymoon, some house improvements, my student loan payments." "Your student loan payments?" I kept my voice light, conversational. "I thought you said you worked your way through nursing school." Another pause. I had to take some loans for the final year. My savings ran out." But Henry was staring at her now with growing confusion. "Sophia, you never mentioned student loans. When we applied for the mortgage, you said you had no debt." I watched the careful mask slip from her face for just a moment, long enough to see the flash of panic underneath. Then it was back in place, but not quite as perfectly as before. "I was embarrassed about the debt," she said, reaching for Henry's hand. "You were doing so well financially, and I didn't want you to think less of me." "But where are the loan statements?" Henry pressed. "I handle all our finances now. I've never seen any student loan payments going out." Sophia pulled her hand away and stood up abruptly. "I need to check on dessert." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Henry and me alone with the weight of unanswered questions. "Mom," Henry whispered, "what else did your investigator find?" I pulled out the folder David had given me and set it on the table between us. "Her real name is Samantha Desai. She's 34, not 38 like she told you. She was married twice before both marriages ended when her husbands discovered she'd been systematically draining their bank accounts." Henry stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. "This can't be right. The woman you married is a professional con artist, Henry. She targets successful, recently single men. She studies them, becomes exactly who they need her to be, marries them quickly, and then begins the financial extraction." From the kitchen came the sound of running water and cabinet doors opening and closing, normal dinner cleanup sounds. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia or Samantha was listening to every word. "The $15,000 from my house money," I continued quietly. "She didn't use it for student loans or house improvements. She sent it to an account in Phoenix where her sister lives. Her sister who supposedly died in that boating accident with their parents." Henry was shaking his head slowly, like a man trying to wake up from a nightmare. "But she loves me. I know she loves me. Honey, she's very good at her job." The kitchen had gone suspiciously quiet. Henry noticed too, his head turning toward the doorway. "Sophia, everything okay in there?" No response. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Henry, where does she keep her purse?" "On the counter by the door. Why?" We both stood at the same time, moving quickly but quietly toward the kitchen. It was empty. The back door stood slightly ajar, and a cool evening breeze was stirring the curtains. "Her purse is gone," Henry said, his voice hollow. I walked to the door and looked out into their backyard. At the far end, near the fence, I could see a figure moving quickly through the shadows. "She's running," I said. Henry rushed to the front window. "Her car is still here. She probably has another one parked nearby. Henry, listen to me carefully. We need to call David immediately, and then we need to call the police." But Henry was staring at the dining room table where Sophia's phone lay next to her abandoned plate. She left her phone. I picked it up. It was locked with a complex pattern. But I noticed something on the back of the case, a small piece of paper with what looked like a series of dots. I tried the pattern, and to my surprise, the phone unlocked. "She had a backup unlock pattern hidden on the case," I said, showing Henry. "Clever, but not clever enough." The call history was mostly empty, but the text messages told a different story. Messages to someone named M. "The old lady is getting suspicious. How much longer do I need to keep this up? The account in Phoenix needs more time." And then from earlier today, "Emergency. She hired a PI. Need extraction plan now. Henry," I said quietly. "Sit down." He was reading over my shoulder, his face getting paler with each message. She was planning to leave anyway. Yes, but not until she'd taken everything she could. I scrolled to the Photos app. It was mostly empty, but there were several screenshots, pictures of bank statements, insurance documents, and investment accounts. All of them belonged to Henry. "She's been documenting your assets," I said. Planning her final withdrawal, Henry sank into a chair, looking like a man who just realized he'd been living with a stranger. "How long do you think she was going to wait?" I thought about the timeline, about the way Sophia had been pushing for joint accounts, for access to Henry's retirement funds, for me to sell my house and contribute more money. "I think she was planning to disappear right after she convinced you to make her the beneficiary of your life insurance policy. She mentioned that last week, didn't she? Said it was important for married couples to update their beneficiaries." Henry nodded slowly. "She said we should do it after dinner tonight. She even had the forms ready." We looked at each other across the wreckage of what had been, just an hour ago, a happy family dinner. My son's marriage was over. The woman he'd loved, trusted, built a life with had never existed at all. But there was something else in Henry's eyes now, alongside the pain and shock, something that looked like relief. "You know what the worst part is, Mom," he said quietly. "I think part of me already knew." The police arrived within 20 minutes, but by then we all knew Sophia, or rather, Samantha, was long gone. Detective Elena Ramirez, a sharp-eyed woman about my age, listened to our story with the weary expression of someone who'd seen this particular tragedy before. "Ma'am," she said to me after examining Sophia's abandoned phone, "you probably saved your son from losing everything he owns. These marriage fraudsters typically escalate quickly once they have legal access to assets." Henry was sitting at his kitchen island, staring at the insurance forms Sophia had prepared for him to sign. "She was so insistent we do this tonight," he murmured. "Said it was romantic to make each other beneficiaries." "Romantic," I repeated dryly. "Nothing says I love you like $1 million life insurance policy." Detective Ramirez almost smiled at that. "Mrs. Adams, I'm going to need you to work with our financial crimes unit. Your attorney's investigation gives us a significant head start, but we need to trace all the money movements and identify other potential victims." "Other victims," the phrase hit me like cold water. "How many others do you think there are?" Henry asked. "Based on the pattern your mother's investigator uncovered, possibly dozens. Samantha Desai has been operating this scheme for at least 8 years across 5 different states." I felt sick thinking about other mothers who'd given their life savings to help their son's happiness, only to watch it disappear into the pockets of a professional predator. Other men like Henry who'd been manipulated into believing they'd found true love. "Detective," I said, "what are the chances we'll get the money back?" "Honestly, slim. These operations are designed to move money quickly through multiple accounts and jurisdictions, but we might be able to prevent her from victimizing others." After the police left, Henry and I sat in his living room, surrounded by the remnants of Samantha's deception. Her coffee mug still sat on the side table, lipstick stain perfectly preserved, her sweater draped over the back of the couch as if she'd just stepped out for a moment. "I have to ask you something, Mom," Henry said quietly, "and I need you to be honest with me. I braced myself. Did you ever like her? Really like her? Or did something always feel off? I thought carefully before answering. The truth was complicated. I wanted to like her so much that I ignored my instincts, I said finally. There were little things that bothered me, but I told myself I was being an overprotective mother-in-law. The way she never had stories from childhood that included specific details, how she always deflected when I asked about her nursing school friends. The fact that in all the months I knew her, not one person from her past ever called or visited. Henry nodded slowly. She said she preferred to live in the present rather than dwell on the past. I thought it was healthy, progressive. It was careful, I corrected. And we both mistook careful for admirable. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. The investigator found something else, David said without preamble. Can you and Henry come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? What kind of something else? The kind that's going to make you very angry. The next morning, David's office felt different. Instead of the usual calm atmosphere of legal consultations, there was an energy that reminded me of a war room. Papers covered every surface, and a man I didn't recognize sat at the conference table with a laptop and several manila folders. Karen, Henry, this is Detective Jason Brooks from the Multi-State Financial Crimes Task Force. Detective Brooks stood to shake our hands. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of focused intensity that made you pay attention. Mrs. Adams, your decision to investigate Sophia Patel may have broken open the largest marriage fraud operation we've seen in the past decade. He opened one of the folders and spread out photographs, driver's licenses, wedding photos, and what looked like surveillance images. All featured the same woman, but with different hair colors, different names, different men beside her. Samantha Desai, alias Sophia Patel, alias Sarah Davis, alias Sandra Pierce. Detective Brooks continued. 4 different identities that we know of, possibly more. 23 confirmed victims across Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and now New Mexico. Henry stared at a wedding photo showing Sophia or Samantha or whoever she really was in a white dress, smiling radiantly next to a man who wasn't him. How long has she been doing this? Our earliest confirmed case dates back 10 years, but we suspect she's been refining this operation much longer. I studied the faces in the photographs. The victims, not Samantha. They all had something in common: middle-aged professional men, most of them recently divorced or widowed. All of them with that slightly desperate look of people who'd given up on finding love and then stumbled into what seemed like a miracle. What's her total take? I asked. Detective Brooks consulted his notes. Conservative estimate, $3.4 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Henry made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. But here's what's interesting, the detective continued. In every previous case, she disappeared within 6 to 8 months of marriage. With your son, she stayed for almost a year. That suggests something different about this operation. Different how? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I knew the answer. She was building something bigger. The other victims lost their savings, their homes, sometimes their retirement accounts, but none of them had a wealthy mother who could be manipulated into contributing additional funds. The room went very quiet. I felt Henry's eyes on me, but I kept staring at the photographs spread across the table. You're saying I was the long-term target, I said finally. Henry was just the entry point. That's our working theory. Everything about the timeline supports it. She met Henry right after his promotion was announced in the Business Journal. She researched his family, learned about your husband's life insurance payout, your property value, your close relationship with your son. I thought about all those conversations where Sophia had gently probed about my finances, my plans for retirement, my thoughts about leaving Henry an inheritance versus enjoying my money while I was alive. I thought she was being thoughtful. Instead, she'd been calculating. So what now? Henry asked. Detective Brooks leaned forward. Now we set a trap. Absolutely not, Henry said immediately. I won't let my mother become bait for this woman. It's not your choice, I said calmly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. It's mine. We were still in David's office, but the atmosphere had shifted from information gathering to strategy planning. Detective Brooks had outlined his proposal use me to lure Samantha back into contact, hopefully catching her in an attempt to access more money. "Mrs. Adams, I understand your son's concerns," the detective said. "This isn't without risk, but Samantha's pattern suggests she won't be able to resist coming back for what she sees as unfinished business." "What makes you so sure she'll contact my mother?" Henry asked. David pulled out another file. "Because according to the investigator's financial analysis, she never got access to the main prize." "Karen, show him your bank statements." I'd brought my financial records as requested, though I wasn't sure why they mattered now. Henry looked at the numbers and frowned. "Mom, this shows you still have over $300,000 in savings and investments. I thought the house sale money was most of what you had." "I let you think that because I didn't want you to feel guilty about accepting my help," I said. "But your father's life insurance and our retirement savings were substantial. The house money was extra." Detective Brooks nodded. "Samantha spent months setting up the perfect scenario to access these funds. She's not going to walk away from $300,000 without trying again." "But she knows we discovered her deception," Henry protested. "Does she?" I asked, thinking it through. "She ran when she overheard us talking, but she doesn't know how much we learned or what evidence we found. For all she knows, we just had suspicions." Detective Brooks smiled. "Exactly, and that's where you come in, Mrs. Adams. We're going to let her think she still has a chance." The plan was elegantly simple. I would reach out to Samantha through a mutual contact, a nurse at the hospital where she'd claimed to work, but who was actually part of a network Samantha used for references and false employment verification. I would express confusion and hurt about her sudden disappearance, but not accusation. "You'll play the concerned mother-in-law who thinks maybe Henry said something to upset her," Detective Brooks explained. "You want to help fix their marriage. You're worried about your son's happiness. And if she takes the bait, she'll come back with a story, something that explains her disappearance and makes Henry the villain. She'll probably claim he was abusive or controlling, that she was afraid for her safety. But she still loves him and wants to work things out." I thought about the woman who'd sat at my son's dinner table, who'd hugged me with such apparent warmth, who'd called me Mom Adams with tears in her eyes when Henry proposed. How much of that performance would she resurrect to get her hands on my money? "There's something else," I said quietly. "Something I haven't told you." All three men looked at me expectantly. "Last week, Sophia asked me about my estate planning. She said she was concerned about Henry's financial security if something happened to me. She wanted to know if I'd considered making provisions for his spouse in my will." Detective Brooks's eyes lit up. She was setting up the endgame. "I think she was planning to arrange an accident," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "Not immediately, but eventually, after she'd secured access to Henry's assets and arranged to inherit mine." The room went very quiet again. Henry had gone pale. "Mom, you can't do this. It's too dangerous." I looked at my son, my successful, intelligent son, who'd been completely fooled by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone to his mother's bank account. "Honey," he said, "I've been handling dangerous situations longer than you've been alive, and right now, I'm the only chance we have to stop her from doing this to someone else's family." 3 days after Samantha's arrest, Henry and I found ourselves in David Goldman's office once again. This time, the atmosphere was different. Instead of the usual calm legal consultation space, papers covered every surface, and a man I didn't recognize sat at the conference table with a laptop and several manila folders. "Karen, Henry, this is Detective Jason Brooks from the Multi-State Financial Crimes Task Force." David introduced us. Detective Brooks stood to shake our hands. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with the kind of focused intensity that demanded attention. "Mrs. Adams," he said, his voice carrying both authority and respect. "Your decision to investigate Sophia Patel may have broken open the largest marriage fraud operation we've seen in the past decade." He opened one of the folders and spread out photographs, driver's licenses, wedding photos, and surveillance images. All featured the same woman, but with different hair colors, different names, different men beside her. Samantha Desai, alias Sophia Patel, alias Sarah Davis, alias Sandra Pierce. Detective Brooks continued. 4 different identities that we know of, possibly more, 23 confirmed victims across Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and now New Mexico. Henry stared at a wedding photo showing Sophia or Samantha in a white dress, smiling radiantly next to a man who wasn't him. The pain in his eyes made my heart ache. "How long has she been doing this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our earliest confirmed case dates back 10 years, but we suspect she's been refining this operation much longer." I studied the faces in the photographs, not Samantha, but her victims. They all shared something middle-aged professional men, most recently divorced or widowed, with that slightly desperate look of people who'd given up on finding love until a miracle appeared. "What's her total take?" I asked. Detective Brooks consulted his notes. "Conservative estimate $3.4 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Henry made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. "But here's what's interesting," the detective continued. "In every previous case, she disappeared within 6 to 8 months of marriage. With your son, she stayed for almost a year. That suggests something different about this operation." "Different how?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. "She was building something bigger. The other victims lost their savings, their homes, sometimes their retirement accounts, but none of them had a wealthy mother who could be manipulated into contributing additional funds." The room went very quiet. I felt Henry's eyes on me, but I kept staring at the photographs spread across the table. "You're saying I was the long-term target," I said finally. "Henry was just the entry point. That's our working theory. Everything about the timeline supports it. She met Henry right after his promotion was announced in the Business Journal. She researched his family, learned about your husband's life insurance payout, your property value, your close relationship with your son." I thought about all those conversations where Sophia had gently probed about my finances, my plans for retirement, my thoughts about leaving Henry an inheritance versus enjoying my money while I was alive. I'd thought she was being thoughtful. Instead, she'd been calculating. "So what now?" Henry asked. Detective Brooks leaned forward. "Now we set a trap." "Absolutely not," Henry said immediately. "I won't let my mother become bait for this woman." "It's not your choice," I said calmly, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "It's mine." The atmosphere shifted from information gathering to strategy planning. Detective Brooks outlined his proposal used me to lure Samantha back into contact, hopefully catching her attempting to access more money. "Mrs. Adams, I understand your son's concerns," the detective said. "This isn't without risk, but Samantha's pattern suggests she won't be able to resist coming back for what she sees as unfinished business. What makes you so sure she'll contact my mother?" Henry asked. David pulled out another file. "Because according to the investigator's financial analysis, she never got access to the main prize. Karen, show him your bank statements." I'd brought my financial records as requested, though I wasn't sure why they mattered now. Henry looked at the numbers and frowned. "Mom, this shows you still have over $300,000 in savings and investments. I thought the house sale money was most of what you had. I let you think that because I didn't want you to feel guilty about accepting my help," I said. "But your father's life insurance and our retirement savings were substantial. The house money was extra." Detective Brooks nodded. "Samantha spent months setting up the perfect scenario to access these funds. She's not going to walk away from $300,000 without trying again." "But she knows we discovered her deception," Henry protested. "Does she?" I asked, thinking it through. "She ran when she overheard us talking, but she doesn't know how much we learned or what evidence we found. For all she knows, we just had suspicions." Detective Brooks smiled. "Exactly. And that's where you come in, Mrs. Adams. We're going to let her think she still has a chance." The plan was elegantly simple. I would reach out to Samantha through a mutual contact and nurse at the hospital where she'd claimed to work, but who was actually part of a network Samantha used for references and false employment verification. I would express confusion and hurt about her sudden disappearance, but not accusation. "You'll play the concerned mother-in-law who thinks maybe Henry said something to upset her," Detective Brooks explained. "You want to help fix their marriage. You're worried about your son's happiness. And if she takes the bait, She'll come back with a story, something that explains her disappearance and makes Henry the villain. She'll probably claim he was abusive or controlling, that she was afraid for her safety, but she still loves him and wants to work things out. I thought about the woman who'd sat at my son's dinner table, who'd hugged me with such apparent warmth, who'd called me Mom Adams with tears in her eyes when Henry proposed. How much of that performance would she resurrect to get her hands on my money? "There's something else," I said quietly. "Something I haven't told you." All three men looked at me expectantly. "Last week, Sophia asked me about my estate planning. She said she was concerned about Henry's financial security if something happened to me. She wanted to know if I'd considered making provisions for his spouse in my will." Detective Brooks's eyes lit up. She was setting up the endgame. "I think she was planning to arrange an accident," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "Not immediately, but eventually. After she'd secured access to Henry's assets and arranged to inherit mine." The room went very quiet again. Henry had gone pale. "Mom, you can't do this. It's too dangerous." I looked at my son, my successful, intelligent son, who'd been completely fooled by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone to his mother's bank account. "Honey," I said, "I've been handling dangerous situations longer than you've been alive, and right now, I'm the only chance we have to stop her from doing this to someone else's family." Our strategy took shape over the next few days. We crafted a message that I sent through Priya Sharma, a nurse who we now knew was Samantha's accomplice at the hospital. The message was simple. I was worried about Sophia. I missed her, and I wanted to understand what had gone wrong. The response came less than 24 hours later. Sophia, using her real phone this time, texted that she was safe but frightened. Henry had become jealous and controlling. She still loved him, but needed space. Could we meet to talk? I agreed, suggesting a public place, a coffee shop in downtown Santa Fe, and Detective Brooks and his team would be there, disguised as customers and staff, recording everything. "Remember," Brooks coached me the morning of the meeting, "she's expecting you to be vulnerable and confused. She'll try to manipulate your maternal instincts, make you feel like you're helping your son by helping her." "I understand," I said. "I'll be appropriately concerned and gullible." Henry looked worried. "Mom, are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," I said, squeezing his hand. "It's time someone turned the tables on her." The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, exactly as planned. I took a table near the window, where the surveillance cameras would have a clear view. At exactly 2 p.m., she walked in. She looked different, darker hair, less makeup, clothes that suggested struggle rather than success, but the calculating eyes were the same. "Mom Adams," she said, approaching my table with tears already forming. "Thank you so much for agreeing to see me." I stood and hugged her the way a loving mother-in-law would, while internally marveling at her audacity. "Of course, sweetheart, I've been so worried about you." She sat down across from me, and I found myself studying her face with new eyes. Now that I knew what to look for, I could see the performance in every expression, the slight delay before each emotional response as she decided what reaction would serve her best. "I don't know where to start," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Everything happened so fast. Henry he changed. He became suspicious of everything I did, every phone call, every friend. He started accusing me of things, saying I was lying about my past." "What kind of things?" I asked gently. "He said I'd never worked at the hospital, which is ridiculous. He called them pretending to be someone else, asking about me. But of course, they couldn't give out information about employees to random callers. When they wouldn't confirm my employment, he decided that meant I'd been lying." I nodded sympathetically. "That does sound like a misunderstanding." "And then he found some old photos on my phone from before we met. Pictures with a friend's husband at a group dinner. And he became convinced I'd been married before." He wouldn't listen when I tried to explain. The lies flowed so smoothly, each one designed to cast Henry as paranoid and unreasonable, while positioning her as the victim of his unfounded suspicions. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her. "Sophia," I said carefully, "Henry showed me some documents, bank records and things. He seemed to think there were financial irregularities. For just a moment, her composure slipped. I saw a flash of cold calculation before the tears returned. "That's the worst part," she said. "He's convinced I took money from your house sale. Mom Adams, I would never. I love this family. You've been like a real mother to me." She reached across the table and took my hand, and I had to resist the urge to pull away. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "But Henry seems very sure about what he found. Maybe if you could just explain the bank transfers. Show him where the money went." "What bank transfers?" she asked, but her grip on my hand had tightened. "The $15,000 that went to Phoenix," I said quietly. "He thinks you sent it to someone there." Samantha went very still. When she looked up at me again, all pretense had disappeared from her eyes. "How much do you really know?" she asked, her voice completely different now, harder, colder, without any trace of the sweet daughter-in-law I'd thought I loved. I smiled at her, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt genuinely powerful. "Everything, Samantha," I said, she said. "We know everything." The transformation was remarkable to watch. In the space of seconds, Samantha Desai shed every trace of the vulnerable, heartbroken young wife and revealed herself as the predator she'd always been. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "That money is gone, and there's nothing you can do to get it back." "Actually," I said, "there's quite a lot we can do." I gestured slightly, and Detective Brooks materialized at our table as if he'd been invisible until that moment. 2 other officers appeared at the exits. "Samantha Desai, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse." She didn't struggle as they cuffed her, but the look she gave me was pure venom. "This isn't over. You can't prove half of what you think you know." "We don't need to prove half," Detective Brooks said pleasantly. "We only need to prove enough." As they led her away, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was finally being served not just for Henry and me, but for all the other families she destroyed. Sadness because I genuinely liked the person I thought she was, even if that person had never existed. Henry appeared at my side as the police car pulled away. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm fine," I said, and realized I meant it. Better than fine, actually. "What happens now? Now we rebuild," I said, "and we do it honestly this time." 2 days after the arrest, Detective Brooks called us in for a briefing. The evidence they'd recovered from Samantha's apartment was damning detailed files on all her victims, including Henry and me. "She had quite a dossier on you, Mrs. Adams," Brooks said, showing me a folder with my photo paper clipped to the front. Inside were notes about my financial status, my daily routines, even my medical history. "How did she get all this?" I asked, disturbed by the invasion of privacy. "Some of it from Henry's home office, some from public records, and some—" He hesitated. "From your trash?" "My trash. It's called dumpster diving. It's a common tactic among identity thieves and fraudsters. They go through your discarded mail, bills, medical records, anything that can give them insight into your life and finances." I felt violated in a way I hadn't expected. The idea that someone had been sifting through my garbage, piecing together the details of my life, made my skin crawl. "There's something else," Brooks continued, his expression growing more serious. "We found evidence that Samantha wasn't working alone." He pulled out another photograph, a woman who looked remarkably like Samantha, but with subtle differences. Same bone structure, same dark eyes, but sharper features, a more severe expression. "This is Andrea Desai, Samantha's twin sister." "Twin sister." Henry looked stunned. "But she told me she was an only child." "That's because Andrea plays the role of the dead sister in these scams," Brooks explained. "When Samantha needs to move money, she sends it to her supposedly deceased sister in Phoenix, who then launders it through their network." I stared at the photo, seeing the family resemblance but also the same calculating intelligence in Andrea's eyes. "So the sister who supposedly died with her parents in the boating accident is very much alive," I said. "And actively involved in the fraud," Brooks confirmed. "What's more, we believe Andrea is actually the mastermind. She plans the operations, identifies targets, and manages the financial side while Samantha executes the relationships. And the parents? Henry asked. Very much alive and living comfortably in Scottsdale. They appear to be uninvolved, but we're investigating. I thought about the elaborate fiction Samantha had created, the tragic orphan who'd overcome adversity through hard work and determination. The perfect story to disarm suspicion and inspire sympathy. There's something else, Brooks said, his voice dropping. We found evidence that Samantha was researching poisons, specifically substances that mimic natural causes of death in older adults. The room went silent. Henry's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. You think she was planning to... He couldn't finish the sentence. We believe she was considering all options for accessing Mrs. Adams' assets, Brooks said carefully. Which brings me to why I called you here today. He pulled out another file. Andrea is still out there, and based on the communications we've recovered from Samantha's devices, she's angry about her sister's arrest. Angry enough to seek revenge? I asked. Possibly, but more likely, she'll try to salvage the operation. You're still a viable target. Mrs. Adams, $300,000 is a significant prize. Henry leaned forward. So what's the plan? Police protection for my mother? Actually, Brooks said, we'd like to use this situation to our advantage. With your permission, Mrs. Adams, we'd like to set a trap for Andrea. Using me as bait again, I savagely said. If you're willing, we believe Andrea will attempt to make contact, perhaps posing as someone else. If we can catch her in the act, we can shut down their entire operation. Henry started to protest, but I raised my hand to stop him. What would I need to do? Go about your normal life, but with our team monitoring you. Make it known that you're planning to liquidate some investments. Perhaps you're buying a new home or making a significant purchase. Something that would entice Andrea to make a move. I considered the proposal. The thought of being targeted again was unsettling, but the possibility of stopping these women from hurting other families was compelling. I'll do it, I said, but on one condition. Name it, Brooks replied. I want to be involved in the planning. I'm not just a passive participant this time. If I'm going to be bait, I want to help design the trap. Brooks smiled. Mrs. Adams, I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next week, we developed our strategy. I would begin visiting banks and investment firms, making inquiries about liquidating my accounts. I would mention to the nurse at my doctor's office, who we now knew was part of the Desai network, that I was planning to buy a condo in a retirement community in Florida. The story would be that Henry and I had a falling out over Sophia's disappearance, and I was moving away to start fresh. The key, Brooks explained during our final planning session, is to make Andrea believe you're vulnerable and isolated. That's when she'll make her move. And you think she'll approach me directly? I asked. No, Brooks said. She's too careful for that. She'll send someone else first, or create a new identity. But eventually, she'll need to get close to you herself. And when she does, I said, we'll be ready. As I left the police station that day, I felt a strange sense of purpose. For years after Richard died, I'd felt increasingly invisible: the widow, the retiree, the aging mother whose only value seemed to be in supporting her son's life. Now, ironically, I was visible again, not just to my son, who was seeing me with new eyes, but to myself. I might be a 68-year-old woman who'd been fooled by a con artist, but I was also someone who could help bring that con artist to justice. 3 days into our operation, I had my first encounter with a member of Andrea's network. I was at the grocery store when a woman approached me in the produce section. "Excuse me," she said with a friendly smile. "Aren't you Karen Adams, Henry's mom?" She was in her early 40s, stylishly dressed with short blonde hair and an open, trustworthy face. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Do I know you?" "I'm Rachel Davis. I worked with Sophia at the hospital." She extended her hand. "I recognized you from the photos Sophia showed us. She always spoke so highly of you." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. According to our intelligence, no one named Rachel Davis worked at Children's Hospital. "That's kind of you to say," I replied, shaking her hand. "It's been a difficult time." "I heard," she said, lowering her voice sympathetically. No one at the hospital can believe what happened. Sophia was so devoted to Henry. I nodded, playing along. It's been hard to make sense of it all. Listen, Rachel said. I don't mean to intrude, but a few of us from the hospital are having dinner Friday night. Would you like to join us? I know Sophia would want us to look out for you. And there it was. The first move. That's very thoughtful, I said. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and Rachel promised to text me the details. As soon as she was out of sight, I called Detective Brooks. It started, I said. T said, and you were right. They're using the hospital connection. Excellent, Brooks replied. We'll run a background check on Rachel Davis, though I'm certain it's a false identity. Keep the dinner date, we'll have agents in place. Friday evening found me at Mariposa, an upscale restaurant on the outskirts of Santa Fe. Rachel had texted that she'd reserved a private dining room for our group. I was wearing a wire, with Detective Brooks and his team monitoring from a van in the parking lot and 2 undercover agents seated in the main dining area. I arrived exactly on time to find Rachel waiting alone. The others are running late, she explained. Hospital emergencies. You know how it is, but they'll be here soon. I took a seat, noting that she'd positioned me with my back to the door, a classic tactic to keep me from seeing who might enter. So, Rachel began, pouring me a glass of wine. Sophia told me you're thinking of moving to Florida. I'm considering it, I said. There's not much keeping me here now. What about Henry? I sighed dramatically. Henry and I aren't speaking much these days. He blames me for Sophia leaving. Rachel leaned forward, eyes widening. That's terrible. Why would he blame you? He thinks I said something to her, made her feel unwelcome somehow. The truth is, I have no idea why she left. One day she was there, the next she was gone. That's so strange, Rachel said, shaking her head. Sophia never mentioned any problems with you. Quite the opposite. The conversation continued in this vein for another 15 minutes, with Rachel skillfully extracting information about my relationship with Henry, my financial situation, and my plans for the future. I fed her the story we'd constructed, making myself appear lonely, wealthy, and estranged from my son, the perfect target. And just as Rachel was asking about my timeline for selling my investments, the door to the private dining room opened. I didn't turn around immediately, playing my role of the unsuspecting victim. Rachel, sorry I'm late, a female voice said from behind me. No problem, Rachel replied, standing. Karen, I'd like you to meet our hospital administrator. Melissa Grant, I turned, and found myself face to face with Andrea Desai. She looked so much like Samantha that for a moment, I was disoriented. Same dark eyes, same elegant features, but her energy was different. Where Samantha had projected warmth and vulnerability, Andrea radiated cool competence. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Adams, she said, extending her hand. Sophia spoke of you often. I shook her hand, feeling the firm, confident grip. Please, call me Karen. Any friend of Sophia's is a friend of mine. As Andrea took a seat beside Rachel, I noticed the subtle glance they exchanged, a silent confirmation that the target was in place. So, Andrea said, Rachel tells me you're thinking of making a big move. Florida, I confirmed. I've been looking at a retirement community called Cypress Shores. Expensive area, Andrea commented casually. Yes, but I've been fortunate with my investments, I replied. And at my age, what am I saving for? Might as well enjoy it while I can, Andrea smiled. That's a healthy attitude. Too many people hoard their wealth until it's too late to enjoy it. The rest of the dinner proceeded according to plan. The fictional hospital colleagues never arrived, leaving just the 3 of us in intimate conversation. Andrea was brilliant, asking thoughtful questions, offering sympathy about my strained relationship with Henry, and gradually establishing herself as someone I could trust. By dessert, she had maneuvered the conversation exactly where she wanted it. You know, Andrea said, I have a brother who's a financial advisor specializing in retirement transitions. He helps people like you maximize their investments while minimizing taxes during major life changes. I'd be happy to introduce you. That's very kind, I said. I could certainly use some advice. My current advisor is a friend of Henry's, and things are a bit awkward now. I understand completely, Andrea said, patting my hand. Family complications can make these transitions so difficult. Why don't I have my brother call you next week? No pressure, just a consultation. I'd appreciate that, I replied. As we were leaving the restaurant, Andrea handed me her business card. Hospital Administrator was printed beneath her false name. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything, she said. Or if you'd just like to talk. I know how isolating these life changes can be. Thank you, Melissa, I said, using her alias. It means a lot to know Sophia had such caring colleagues. I watched them drive away before walking to my own car, where Detective Brooks was waiting. You were magnificent, he said. We got everything on tape. She's good, I admitted. Very good. If I didn't know who she was, I'd completely trust her. That's why they're so successful, Brooks replied. They're experts at creating instant rapport and trust. What's your assessment? Will she make contact again? Definitely, through the fictional brother first, then directly. She wants my money, detective, and she thinks I'm an easy mark. Then we continue as planned. We'll set up the fake financial advisor meeting and see how deep she's willing to go. As I drove home that night, I thought about the twins Samantha and Andrea and the elaborate world of deception they'd created. They were intelligent, charming, and completely ruthless. In another life, with different choices, they could have been successful at anything they chose. Instead, they'd built a criminal enterprise on the exploitation of human loneliness and trust, and I was going to help bring it down. The meeting with Melissa Grant's brother was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Detective Brooks and his team spent the weekend setting up an elaborate sting operation. They created a fake financial advisor's office in a downtown business complex, complete with convincing signage, professional-looking brochures, and undercover officers posing as staff. We've identified the man you'll be meeting, Brooks told me during our final briefing. His real name is Marcus Winters. He's been part of the Desai network for at least 5 years, posing as various professionals' attorney, accountant, insurance agent, whatever the situation requires. And his role in this scenario, I asked. He'll establish himself as a legitimate financial advisor, gain your trust, then suggest estate planning changes that will ultimately benefit Andrea. We expect him to recommend her under her Melissa Grant, alias as a potential trustee or executor, making it easier for her to access my assets, I said. Exactly. He'll also likely try to get you to sign documents authorizing transfers or changes to your accounts. Don't worry, nothing you sign in that office will be legally binding. We've made sure of that. Henry sat beside me, his face tight with concern. He'd been supportive but anxious throughout this process, torn between wanting justice and fearing for my safety. Mom, I still don't like this, he said. These people were willing to poison Sophia's previous victims. What if they try something similar with you? That's why we'll have surveillance at all times, Brooks assured him. Mrs. Adams will never be truly alone with any of them. I patted Henry's hand. I'll be fine, honey. I've become quite good at this spy business. You know. He didn't smile. Just promise me you'll be careful. I promise. The fake office of James Grant Financial Advisor was impressively convincing. Located in a high-end business complex with a view of the mountains, it featured tasteful furniture, credentials on the walls, and a receptionist who greeted me warmly when I arrived. Mrs. Adams, welcome. Mr. Grant is expecting you. Can I offer you some coffee or tea while you wait? Just water, thank you, I replied, remembering Detective Brooks' warning about accepting food or drinks that hadn't been prepared by the team. Marcus Winters, James Grant, emerged from his office moments later. He was tall and distinguished-looking, with silver hair and the confident manner of someone accustomed to handling wealth. If I hadn't known better, I would have been completely convinced by his professional demeanor. Mrs. Adams, he greeted me warmly. Please come in. Melissa has told me so much about you. For the next hour, Marcus conducted what appeared to be a legitimate financial consultation. He asked detailed questions about my investments, retirement accounts, and future plans. He offered reasonable advice about tax implications and suggested several potentially beneficial strategies for managing my assets during my relocation. If I hadn't known better, I would have been completely convinced of his expertise and legitimacy. "Now," he said, after we'd covered the basics, "there's something specific I'd like to discuss with you. Given your situation moving to a new state, some family tension, have you considered updating your estate planning documents?" "Estate planning?" I asked, as if the thought hadn't occurred to me. "Yes, it's something many people overlook during major life transitions, but it's critical. If something were to happen to you, you'd want to ensure your wishes were carried out without complications." "I suppose you're right," he said. "My current will leaves everything to Henry, but given our recent difficulties," Marcus nodded sympathetically, "it's a delicate situation. Would you be open to meeting with our estate planning specialist? She could review your current documents and suggest appropriate updates." "That would be helpful," I agreed. "Excellent. As it happens, Melissa, who you met at dinner, has extensive experience in this area. She works with our firm part-time, specializing in complex family situations like yours." And there it was, the next step in their plan. Andrea was positioning herself to directly influence my estate planning, creating an opportunity to insert herself or her proxies into my will. "Melissa," I said, feigning surprise. "The hospital administrator," Marcus smiled. "She wears many hats. Hospital administration is her primary role, but she's also a licensed attorney with expertise in elder law and estate planning. Would you be comfortable working with her?" "Of course," I said. "She seemed very knowledgeable." "Perfect. I'll have her contact you to set up a meeting. In the meantime," he said, sliding a folder across the desk, "here's some information about the investment strategies we discussed. Take your time reviewing it, and we can move forward whenever you're ready." As I left the office, I couldn't help but admire the sophistication of their approach. Nothing overtly criminal had occurred. No pressure had been applied. They were building a relationship, establishing trust, and creating multiple seemingly legitimate pathways to my assets. 2 days later, Melissa Grant called to schedule our estate planning meeting. She suggested we meet at my apartment rather than her office. "Estate planning is such a personal matter," she said. "Many clients prefer the comfort of their own home for these discussions." "That would be fine," I agreed, knowing this was exactly what Detective Brooks had anticipated. They wanted to see my living situation, assess my vulnerability, and perhaps search for additional information about my assets. The day of the meeting, Brooks and his team arrived early to set up surveillance equipment and brief me on safety protocols. "We'll have audio and video coverage of the entire apartment," he explained. "2 agents will be stationed in the building, and I'll be in the surveillance van outside. If at any point you feel unsafe, use the panic phrase we discussed, and we'll intervene immediately." "I understand," I said. "But I don't think it will come to that. Andrea is too smart to do anything overtly threatening. She's playing a long game." "Just be careful," Henry urged. He'd been part of every planning session, supportive but anxious about my role in the operation. "These people are dangerous. Mom?" "I know, honey," I say, squeezing his hand. "But so am I, in my own way." At precisely 3 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Andrea Melissa standing there in a conservative business suit, briefcase in hand. "Karen," she said warmly, "thank you for inviting me into your home." "Please, come in," I replied. "Can I offer you some tea?" "That would be lovely." As I prepared the tea, I watched Andrea scanning my apartment, taking in the modest furnishings, the family photos, the small details of my life. Her eyes lingered on a framed photo of Henry and me from his college graduation. "Your son?" she asked, picking up the frame. "Yes, that's Henry," I said, bringing the tea tray to the coffee table. "Handsome man," she commented. "You must be very proud." "I am," I said, "though things are complicated right now." "Families often are," she replied, setting down the photo. "Which is why estate planning is so important. It provides clarity and direction when emotions might otherwise cloud judgment." For the next hour, Andrea walked me through a comprehensive review of estate planning options. She was knowledgeable and articulate, explaining complex legal concepts in accessible terms. Had I not known her true identity, I would have been thoroughly impressed by her expertise. "Now," she said, after covering the basics, "let's talk about your specific situation. You mentioned your current will leaves everything to Henry, but you're reconsidering given recent tensions. What are your thoughts about alternative arrangements?" "I'm not sure," I said, playing the role of the uncertain, vulnerable client. "I don't have other close family." "There are many options," Andrea said smoothly. "You could consider a trust with specific conditions for Henry's inheritance, or you might designate a portion of your estate to causes or institutions you care about." She paused, then added casually, "Some of my clients also consider naming a trusted advisor as executor or trustee, someone who can ensure their wishes are carried out objectively, without family emotions complicating matters." "Someone like you?" I asked, deliberately naive. Andrea smiled modestly. "It's not uncommon. As an attorney with experience in these matters, I can provide the objectivity and expertise many families need. But that's entirely your decision. Of course." She opened her briefcase and removed several documents. "I've taken the liberty of drafting some preliminary options for your consideration. No decisions needed today, just food for thought." I glanced at the papers, noting the carefully constructed provisions that would, if implemented, give Melissa Grant significant control over my assets. "This is very thorough," I said. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into my situation." "I believe in personalized service," she replied. "Speaking of which, I noticed your tea cabinet when I was in the kitchen. You seem to have quite a collection." "Oh yes," I said. "Herbal teas are a passion of mine. I find them so soothing, especially as I've gotten older." "I completely understand," Andrea said. "I've been exploring natural remedies myself recently. In fact, I brought you something." She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a small tin. "This is a special blend I discovered. It's particularly good for sleep and anxiety, something many people your age struggle with during major life transitions." I accepted the tin, feeling a chill despite the warm apartment. This was it the moment Brooks had warned might come. The tea was almost certainly laced with something that would make me vulnerable or potentially mimic natural causes of death if administered in higher doses. "How thoughtful," I said, placing the tin on the coffee table. "I'll try it tonight." "Just a small amount at first," she advised. "It's quite potent." Our meeting concluded with Andrea promising to send me finalized documents for review, and me promising to consider her suggestions about estate planning. As I showed her to the door, she paused. "One more thing. Karen, I'm hosting a small dinner party next weekend at my home. Just a few close friends and clients. I'd love for you to join us. It might help take your mind off everything that's happening with Henry." "That sounds lovely," I said. "Thank you for including me." "Of course," she replied. "We're friends now, aren't we?" As soon as she was gone, Detective Brooks and his team entered the apartment. An evidence technician immediately secured the tea tin. "We'll have this analyzed immediately," Brooks said. "In the meantime, we need to decide about the dinner invitation." "I'm going," I said firmly. "It could be dangerous," Brooks cautioned. "Her home territory, her associates present." "It's also our best opportunity to gather evidence against her entire network," I countered. "You said yourself that these dinner parties are likely recruitment events where they identify potential marks and assign them to different members of the team." Brooks looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You understand, Mrs. Daddams, that if you attend this dinner, you'll be walking into the lion's den." I thought about Henry, about the other victims whose lives had been shattered by the Desai twins, about the careful, calculated way Andrea had tried to poison me in my own home. "Detective," I said, "sometimes the only way to catch a lion is to enter its den. Just make sure your team is ready when I do." The analysis of the tea confirmed our suspicions. It contained a sedative and a substance that, in larger doses, could cause symptoms resembling a heart attack virtually undetectable in a routine autopsy, especially in an older woman with a history of hypertension like me. "She's escalating faster than we anticipated," Brooks said during our next briefing. "This suggests she's feeling pressure, perhaps due to Samantha's arrest and the potential exposure of their operation." "Or she sees me as particularly vulnerable," I suggested. "A lonely old woman estranged from her only family member. with a significant fortune and no one watching out for her interests. Either way, the dinner party is our opportunity to gather definitive evidence. We'll have agents posing as waitstaff, and we'll equip you with both audio and video recording devices. Henry, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. This is getting too dangerous. Mom, these people were planning to poison you. What if they try something at the dinner? They won't, Brooks assured him. Not with other guests present. Their method is to build trust slowly, to establish a pattern of regular contact before they make their final move. Besides, I added, I'll be careful about what I eat and drink. And your father always said I had the constitution of an ox. Henry didn't smile. Dad would have hated this. You know, putting yourself at risk like this. Your father would have wanted justice, I said softly. Just like I do. The dinner party was scheduled for Saturday evening at Andrea's home, a Spanish-style villa in the foothills outside Santa Fe. The location itself spoke volumes about the success of their criminal enterprise expansive grounds. Panoramic views. A level of luxury that would impress potential victims and reinforce the image of legitimate wealth and success. Detective Brooks and his team spent days preparing for the operation. They established surveillance positions around the property, created backstories for the undercover agents who would pose as serving staff, and equipped me with a designer necklace containing a sophisticated recording device. Remember, Brooks said as his technician adjusted the necklace, if at any point you feel you're in danger, use the panic phrase. We'll have the house surrounded, and we can be inside within 30 seconds. I'll be fine, I assured him. I'm starting to enjoy this secret agent business. Just don't enjoy it too much, he warned. These people are professionals, and they're dangerous. So am I replied. They just don't know it yet. Andrea's home was even more impressive up close. As I drove through the security gates, I could see the villa perched on a hill, its adobe walls glowing gold in the evening light. A valet took my car, and I followed the path to the front door, where Andrea greeted me with a warm embrace. Karen, I'm so glad you could make it, she said, ushering me inside. Come, let me introduce you to everyone. The interior was stunning, soaring ceilings, museum-quality artwork, furnishings that spoke of wealth and taste. About a dozen guests mingled in the great room, drinks in hand, engaged in what appeared to be pleasant conversation. Andrea led me through the crowd, introducing me to each person, a retired surgeon and his wife, a widow who had recently moved to Santa Fe from Chicago, a divorced executive who had just sold his technology company. I recognized the pattern immediately, all potential targets, all with significant assets, all in some state of transition or vulnerability. And this, Andrea said, bringing me to a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, is Judge Richard Harmon. Richard, this is Karen Adams, the one I told you about. The judge took my hand, his grip firm and confident. A pleasure to meet you, Karen. Melissa speaks very highly of you. All good things, I hope, I replied with a smile. Only the best, he assured me. She tells me you're considering a move to Florida. Yes, I'm looking at a retirement community there. Cypress Shores, he asked. I have a winter home near there. Lovely area. And so it went. Throughout the cocktail hour, I was passed from guest to guest, each conversation seemingly casual but subtly probing my financial situation, my relationship with my son, my plans for the future. I played my role, sharing just enough vulnerability to be believable, just enough financial information to be enticing. Dinner was served in a formal dining room with a view of the mountains. I was seated between the judge and Marcus Winter's James Grant, who greeted me like an old friend. Karen, wonderful to see you again. Have you had a chance to review those documents I sent over? I've glanced at them, I said. There's a lot to consider. No rush, he assured me. These decisions shouldn't be made hastily. The meal was exquisite multiple courses of gourmet food, paired with expensive wines. I was careful to eat only what everyone else was eating and to barely sip my wine, mindful of Detective Brooks' warnings. As the evening progressed, I noticed a pattern in the seating arrangements and conversations. Each vulnerable guest, the widow, the divorced executive. Myself was positioned between two members of the Desai network. We were being assessed, our weaknesses identified, our potential value calculated. After dinner, Andrea invited us to the terrace for coffee and dessert. The night was clear, the view spectacular, with the lights of Santa Fe twinkling in the distance. She skillfully divided the group, guiding me and the judge to a secluded corner. "Richard has been such a help to me in understanding the legal system here in New Mexico," she said. "I thought you two might have some interesting conversations about estate planning." "Melissa mentioned you're concerned about your current arrangements," the judge said once Andrea had moved away. "Family tensions can make these matters particularly complex." "Yes," I agreed. "My son and I are at odds right now. It's made me reconsider some things. I understand completely. My daughter and I went through a similar situation after my wife passed. These are difficult waters to navigate alone." He spoke with such genuine empathy that for a moment I wondered if he was truly part of the scheme. Could he be an innocent participant? Another potential victim? But then he continued. "Melissa has been invaluable in helping me restructure my estate. She has a remarkable ability to anticipate problems and create solutions. She does seem very capable," I said carefully. "More than capable," he said, lowering his voice. "Between us, I've appointed her as my executor." My daughter was furious. "Of course, but Melissa will ensure my wishes are respected without emotional complications." And there it was confirmation that the judge was either complicit or another victim, further along in the process than I was pretending to be. "That's an interesting idea," I said. "I've been wondering if I should consider something similar." "I would highly recommend it. In fact," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I brought something for you. Melissa mentioned you might be interested." He handed me a business card. "Harold Wilson, attorney at law, best estate planning attorney in the Southwest. He works closely with Melissa on complex situations like yours." I accepted the card, noting the name was likely another alias, another member of the network. "Thank you," I said. "I'll give him a call." "Do that," the judge said, patting my hand. "The sooner these matters are settled, the better. At our age, one never knows what tomorrow might bring." The thinly veiled threat was not lost on me. As the evening wound down, Andrea found me again. "I hope you've enjoyed yourself, Karen." "Very much," I assured her. "You have a beautiful home and fascinating friends." "I'm glad. I was hoping we might have a chance for a private chat before you leave. Would you mind staying a bit after the others go?" My pulse quickened. This was it, the opportunity we'd been waiting for. "Of course," I said. "I'd like that." I watched as Andrea smoothly managed the departures of her other guests, making each feel special and valued. The judge gave me a meaningful look as he left, a silent reminder to call the attorney whose card I'd tucked into my purse. Finally, only Andrea and I remained. She led me to a smaller, more intimate sitting room and poured us each a brandy from a crystal decanter. "I don't usually indulge," I said, accepting the glass but not drinking. "Special occasions call for special treats," she replied. "And I consider this a special occasion, the beginning of what I hope will be a valuable friendship." She sat across from me, studying me with those calculating eyes so similar to her sister's. "Karen, I'm going to be direct with you. I believe I can help you secure your future in a way that protects your assets and ensures your wishes are respected." "That sounds wonderful," I said. "But I'm not sure what you mean exactly." "I mean that I've observed your situation closely. You're a woman of means with an estranged son who may not have your best interests at heart. You're contemplating a significant life change, moving to a new state where you'll have no established support system." She leaned forward. "These are vulnerable circumstances, especially for someone your age." "I suppose they are," I admitted. "I'd like to propose an arrangement," she continued. "A professional relationship that would provide you with protection and peace of mind." "What kind of arrangement?" "I would serve as your financial and legal representative. I would manage your assets, oversee your relocation, and ensure that your estate planning reflects your true wishes." "That's very generous," I said. "But why would you do this for me?" "We've only just met." Andrea smiled, a calculated expression that never reached her eyes. "Let's just say I have a special interest in helping women like you, women who have been undervalued by their families. And what would you expect in return? A standard management fee, of course. And perhaps, she paused, perhaps you might consider including me in your estate planning, not as a primary beneficiary, naturally, but as a trustee or executor, someone who would ensure your wishes were carried out after you're gone. I nodded slowly, as if considering the idea. And this would involve changing my current will, the one that names Henry as my heir. Not necessarily changing the main beneficiary, she said carefully, but adding provisions, protections. If you were to become incapacitated, for instance, who would make decisions on your behalf? Would you want that to be Henry, given your current relationship? I hadn't thought of that, I said, feigning concern. These are critical considerations. Karen, life is unpredictable, especially as we age. She reached for her briefcase and removed a folder. I've taken the liberty of drafting some documents for your consideration, a durable power of attorney, a healthcare directive, and a codicil to your will that would name me as executor. That's very thorough, I said, accepting the folder but not opening it. I'll need time to review these. Of course, she said, but I would encourage you not to wait too long. These protections are most valuable when they're in place before they're needed. I placed the folder in my purse, next to the attorney's card the judge had given me. I'll give it serious thought. Excellent. Andrea stood, indicating our meeting was concluding. I have a good feeling about this. Karen, I think we're going to be very important to each other. As she walked me to the door, she added casually, by the way, how did you enjoy the tea blend I gave you? Oh, I said, momentarily caught off guard. I haven't had a chance to try it yet. Her expression flickered briefly disappointment, perhaps, or suspicion. You should. It's quite transformative. I'll do that, I promised, wondering if she expected me to be already under the influence of whatever she had laced it with. At the door, she embraced me again, holding on slightly longer than was comfortable. Drive safely, Karen. And remember, you're not alone anymore. I'm here to help you. Thank you, Melissa, I said. For everything. As I drove away from the villa, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The necklace recorder had captured every word, every subtle threat. Combined with the doctored tea and the suspicious legal documents, we had enough evidence to move against Andrea and her network. I called Detective Brooks from my car. It's done. She made her pitch, complete with power of attorney documents and not-so-subtle references to the drugged tea. Excellent work, Mrs. Adams, he replied. We have everything on tape. Return to the rendezvous point immediately. We're moving in now. As I reached the designated meeting spot, I could see police vehicles speeding toward Andrea's villa, lights flashing but sirens silent. Within minutes, Brooks called again. We've got her, he said. And based on the documents we found in her office, we'll be making additional arrests tonight, including Judge Harmon and at least 4 others. The judge, too, I asked, surprised despite everything I'd seen. He's been working with them for years, using his position to approve fraudulent guardianships and estate transfers. The corruption runs deep. Mrs. Adams. I thought about all the victims who had trusted these people, who had been manipulated, exploited, and in some cases, possibly murdered. What happens now? I asked. Now we build our case. Your testimony will be crucial, but the evidence we've gathered tonight should be enough to put Andrea away for a very long time. Her sister, too. I felt a profound sense of closure, knowing that the Desai twins would no longer be able to prey on vulnerable people like me, like us. But there was also sadness for what might have been. Such intelligence, such charisma, wasted on deception and exploitation. You've done something remarkable, Mrs. Adams, Brooks said, interrupting my thoughts. You've helped us dismantle one of the most sophisticated elder fraud operations we've ever encountered. You should be proud. I am, I said simply. But right now, I just want to go home to my son. 6 months later, I stood in the courtroom as the judge, a real one this time, delivered the sentences for Andrea and Samantha Desai. The trial had been lengthy and complex, with evidence presented from cases spanning a decade in multiple states. The defendants have shown a pattern of deliberate, calculated exploitation of vulnerable individuals, the judge said. They have demonstrated no remorse for their actions, which have caused immeasurable financial and emotional harm to dozens of victims. He sentenced each sister to 25 years in federal prison, with additional state charges pending in Arizona and Colorado. As the bailiff led them away, Andrea turned to look at me one last time. The cold calculation was gone from her eyes, replaced by something else, not remorse. Exactly, but perhaps recognition. Recognition that she had finally encountered someone she couldn't manipulate or control. Outside the courthouse, Henry put his arm around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom. Really over." "Yes," I agreed. "Now we can focus on rebuilding." And rebuild we did. With the help of Detective Brooks and the Financial Crimes Unit, we were able to recover about 70% of the money Samantha had stolen from us, far more than most victims ever see returned. I used part of it to buy a new home smaller than the one I'd sold, but chosen by me, for me. Not because someone else had convinced me I needed it. Henry helped me move in, and for the first time in years, I felt our relationship had found solid footing again. "You know," he said one evening as we sat on my new patio, watching the sunset, "I never really thanked you." "For what?" "For saving me from her, from them. I was completely blind, completely fooled." "We both were," I reminded him. "She was very good at what she did. But you figured it out. You were stronger than I was." I took his hand. "Different, not stronger. We each have our gifts, Henry. Mine apparently include a talent for amateur detective work." He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard enough of lately. "You were amazing. Mom, Dad would have been so proud." "He would have been proud of both of us," I said, "for finding our way back to each other." A month later, I received a letter from Marcus Holloway, one of Samantha's previous victims who had testified at the trial. He thanked me for my role in bringing the sisters to justice and shared how the experience had affected him. Knowing I wasn't alone, that others had been through the same thing, helped me stop blaming myself. He wrote, "You gave all of us our dignity back." His words stayed with me, prompting an idea that grew into a mission. With Detective Brooks' guidance, I established a foundation to educate older adults about financial fraud and exploitation. We created workshops, speaking engagements, and support groups for victims. Henry, to my surprise, became deeply involved in the Foundation's work. His background in financial consulting proved invaluable as we developed materials to help seniors protect themselves from scams and predatory relationships. "You found your calling, Mom," he told me after one particularly successful workshop where I'd shared my story with a room full of retirees. "You're changing lives." "I'm just trying to make something good come from something bad," I said. But he was right. In the strange alchemy of life, the pain and humiliation of being deceived had transformed into something meaningful and powerful. At 68, I had discovered a new purpose, a new chapter in my life that I never could have anticipated. One afternoon, as I was preparing notes for an upcoming presentation, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Detective Brooks standing there, a folder in his hand. "Mrs. Adams," he greeted me with a smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said, inviting him in. "And please, after everything we've been through, I think you can call me Karen." "Karen, then," he agreed, taking a seat in my living room. "I have some news I thought you'd want to hear in person." He opened the folder and removed several photographs. These were found in a storage unit registered to Andrea Desai. We believe they're pictures of victims who didn't survive their encounters with the sisters. I looked at the images, elderly men and women, all smiling for the camera, all unaware of the danger they were in. "How many?" "We've identified 7 so far. All died of apparently natural causes, heart attacks, strokes, falls. But given what we now know about their methods..." "They were murdered," I said quietly. "Yes, the medical examiner is reviewing the cases, but some date back nearly a decade. It will be difficult to prove definitively." I thought about how close I had come to being one of those photographs, how easily I might have become another natural death, mourned briefly and then forgotten. "There's something else," Brooks continued. The Desai sisters weren't the only ones running these operations. We've identified similar networks in Florida, New York, and California. Your foundation's work is more important than ever. Then we'll expand, I said decisively. More workshops, more outreach, whatever it takes to protect people from predators like the Desais. Brooks looked at me with undisguised admiration. You know, when we first met, I thought you were just another victim. I never imagined you'd become one of our most valuable assets in fighting elder fraud. Neither did I admitted. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? As Detective Brooks left, I returned to my desk and the notes for my presentation. The title page read, Recognizing the Predator, How to Protect Yourself from Financial Exploitation. Below it, I had written a quote from my husband Richard, something he used to say whenever we faced a challenge. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. I hadn't understood the full meaning of those words until now. The deception, the betrayal, the fear they had all been part of the forge, testing me, strengthening me, transforming me into someone I never knew I could be. At 68, most people thought my most significant contributions were behind me. But as I looked at the foundation materials spread across my desk, at the letters from victims who had found their voices through our work, at the schedule of speaking engagements that would take me across the country, I knew the truth. My greatest chapter was just beginning. That evening, Henry came over for dinner, bringing with him a woman he'd been dating cautiously, tentatively for the past month. As I watched them together, I saw the healing that had taken place in my son. The wariness remained, but alongside it was a new wisdom, a deeper understanding of both himself and others. "Mom," he said as we sat down to eat, "Elaine and I have been talking about the foundation. She has some ideas for reaching younger adults, teaching them how to help protect their parents and grandparents." "That sounds wonderful," I said, smiling at Elaine. "We need all the help we can get." As the conversation flowed around my table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for what had happened, I would never be grateful for the Desai sisters and their cruelty, but for what had emerged from it. A stronger relationship with my son, a new purpose in my life, a community of survivors and advocates working together to create change. In the darkest moment of my life, when I discovered that the daughter-in-law I loved had never existed, I thought my world was ending. I couldn't have known that it was actually beginning anew. That night, after Henry and Elaine had left, I sat on my patio looking at the stars. I thought about all the twists and turns that had brought me to this moment, the urgent call from David Goldman, the devastating discovery of Sophia's true identity, the dangerous game I'd played with Andrea, and now the foundation that was touching lives across the country. "You'd be amazed, Richard," I said softly to the night sky. "You'd never believe what your quiet, reliable wife has been up to." And somewhere, somehow, I felt he knew, and that he was proud. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and I had emerged not just strong, but radiant with purpose. At 68, I had finally discovered who Karen Adams truly was, and she was magnificent.